Thanks very much for being with us today. The issue that I am working on, which is of enormous consequence for our country and the world, is this issue of Yemen. And it bothers me a little bit that many people do not know what is going on in this very poor country of Yemen, about 28 million people. And the reality is that about 3 years ago, Saudi Arabia intervened in an ongoing civil war in Yemen. And the result of that intervention has been an absolute humanitarian disaster for the people of that country. According to the Save the Children organization, some 85,000 children in Yemen have already starved to death. Imagine that, 85,000. And what the United Nations tells us is that millions of people are in imminent danger of starvation. There are 10,000 outbreaks of cholera, new outbreaks of cholera every single week, which weakens people's ability to resist disease and leads to more death. So what we are focusing on now, and it's an unusual coalition, it's myself and other progressives, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, working with conservative members of the Senate, Mike Lee of Utah, one of the more conservative members, Rand Paul of Kentucky. What we have come together to say is that the United States has got to get out of this Saudi-led war in Yemen, and instead of helping the Saudis drop bombs and destroy that country, we've got to work hard to bring peace, end that civil war, and to provide the humanitarian aid that the people of Yemen desperately need. So it's food, not bombs. It's peace, not war. The second issue that the war in Yemen raises is the role of Saudi Arabia. And as many of you may know, for many years, I have been one of those people in the Senate who have said, you know, maybe Saudi Arabia, which is a despotic regime controlled by a handful of billionaires in the Saud family, a regime which treats women not as second-class citizens, but as third-class citizens, a regime that does not tolerate dissent in any form, democracy in any form. Maybe this is not the regime that we should be hooked up with. And of course, Trump has made an ongoing bad relationship even worse with his great affection and love, apparently, for the leader of that country, Mohammed bin Salman, so-called MBS. So I think we're seeing increased attention on Saudi Arabia, not because they are leading the war in Yemen, which has killed so many people, but because of the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, who was a Washington Post journalist. And I think people have seen the brutality and the despotic nature of this regime and everybody believes that the Crown Prince bin Salman knew about it, organized it. When you see the cold-blooded murder of this dissident journalist in the consulate, the Saudi consulate in Turkey, where he is murdered when he gets in, his body is dismembered, I mean, beyond belief, unspeakable crime. So I think even members of the Congress are beginning to wake up and say, why are we having a relationship with a regime as brutal and as despotic as that regime? So that's the second important part of this discussion. The third part deals with an ongoing issue that, again, conservatives and progressives have been concerned about for a long time. And as I think anyone who understands the nature of the United States Constitution knows that the issue of war, whether or not we send our troops off to war, is not a presidential prerogative, it is a congressional prerogative. That's what the Constitution is very clear about. It is the Congress that votes and determines whether we go to war. But for a number of years, under both Republican leadership in the White House and Democratic leadership, it has been a bipartisan poor policy, Democrats and Republicans. Congress has abdicated its constitutional responsibility to be the branch of government which determines whether or not we go to war. The war in Yemen and America's role in that war has never been approved by the Congress, never been voted upon by the Congress. In my view, and the view of many people, it is unconstitutional, it is unauthorized. So what we want to do is reclaim the constitutional role that Congress must play on this important issue of war and peace. As you may know, last week, in an historic vote, for the first time, we have had a positive congressional effort under the War Powers Act. And what we managed to do is discharge the resolution that I introduced with Senator Lee and Senator Murphy. We got it out of committee, and right now the next vote, take place this week, next week, will be to proceed. And then we got to vote on final passage. Needless to say, there are a number of my colleagues, Republican colleagues in this instance, who are trying to trying to defeat that effort. And what they're trying to do is to add a whole lot of amendments. Many of them will have nothing to do with the issue of Yemen or the War Powers Act. And what they hope to do is, by having all kinds of amendments, make it impossible for us to proceed. So that's the issue that we're working on now. What we want is a clean vote on Yemen. If we have that vote, I think we win it. We got 63 votes bipartisan to get it out of committee. I think we have a majority to pass it. And when we pass it, then goes to the House, and that's a whole other struggle unto itself. The Republican leadership in the House doesn't want it. Of course, Trump loves the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia. Got to deal with that one. But bottom line is, we need the American people to stand up and to say that the United States should not be part of a Saudi-led war in Yemen, which is the worst humanitarian disaster on the earth right now. So let's all work together. Let's end the war. Let's rethink our relationship with this despotic Saudi regime, and let us have the Congress reclaim its constitutional responsibility to make war or not go to war, and take that away from Democratic or Republican presidents. So that's where we are right now. Thanks very much for watching.